Hi, everybody. So we are going to do the last part of the digestive system today. We have a stop where we were talking about the small intestine and the three main um, segmentations, which were duodenum, jejunum, and ileum. We also talked about the two main functions being the chemical digestion and absorption of the nutrients. We also mentioned that the small intestine itself does not produce any of the enzymes that are needed for the process of digestion or chemical digestion. Rather, it relies on the enzymes that are released from the pancreas into the small intestine. So we are moving on to talk about the pancreas before we actually start talking about the large intestine. So pancreas is a structure. It actually made up of multiple sections called head, body, and tail. It is located or tucked in underneath the stomach. So the three parts of the pancreas, as I mentioned, would be, would be your head, the midsection or the elongated section, which is the body, and then the end of it, which is again facing the spleen, will be the tail of the tail of the pancreas. Now, in terms of the pancreas, you can discuss it both in terms of an accessory organ for the digestive system, and that's the exocrine function, which is about 90% of the mass of the pancreas dedicated to that. And you also can talk about it in terms of the endocrine system, producing the two main hormone, insulin and glucagon, which helps you balance the blood glucose or help you maintain your glucose homeostasis. So what are the exocrine functions of the pancreas? They are associated with a specific type of cell called Asner cells. These are the ones that produce and secrete the digestive enzymes into the first part of the small intestine, which we already know called duodenum. Please do note that the enzymes that are released by the pancreas are identified as zymogens, which implies that as they get released from the pancreas, they are inactive. However, as they introduced into the duodenum, they are activated and are essential in terms of chemical digestion of your food groups. Your pancreas also has a capacity to release bicarbonate, which also helps with neutralizing the acidic environment of the stomach. Now, the endocrine function of the pancreas are associated with, again, production of the two main hormones, glucagon and insulin. What is the cells that are responsible for production of insulin? These are your beta cells. And glucagon, however, are produced by your alpha cells. What is the difference between these two hormones? So insulin gets released when your glucose level is high, and what it forces your body to do is it forces your or allows your cells, like your liver cells, your muscle cells, and your fat cells, to take up the glucose and convert that to glycogen, which is a complex carbohydrate, therefore allowing your glucose level to lower. Now, imagine you've been fasting for 6-7 hours and your normal glucose level in your blood has slowly stopped to drop because you have been consuming it. So when your body notices that the glucose level is going down, it activates the release of, or it allows the alpha cells to release glucagon. Glucagon works opposite of what your what your insulin does, which implies that it will take the glycogen, which is the complex carbohydrate, takes glycogen, which is the complex carbohydrate, and breaks it down to individual glucose molecules, which are essential in terms of increasing your blood glucose back to normal. Now, moving on, again, notice that pancreas is connected directly to the duodenum. So this is one connection that's called the pancreatic duct. And then it also has a secondary duct you see right here called the accessory duct. We'll discuss this in more detail as we go through the rest of the PowerPoint. The other accessory gland that works closely with the duodenum and the small intestine is your liver. A few things that we need to know about liver. First of all, it is suspended by a ligament called falciform ligament to the underneath of the diaphragm. It is made up of two lobes. The larger lobe is on the right-hand side, which is this larger structure you see right here. And then the smaller lobe, which is the left lobe, that is pointing toward the stomach. A lot of my students get confused because anatomically you would say, this is my right, this is my left. So to clarify, this picture, the top picture in this PowerPoint or this slide is showing the posterior aspect of the liver. The picture you see on the bottom, this is the right lobe, which is the same as this one. And this is your left lobe, which is the same as the smaller one. So the orientation for the bottom liver picture is correct, but for the top one is inverse because you are looking at the back of the liver. Now you also have two smaller lobes called the quadrate and caudate lobe. You have the top one right here next to the inferior vena cava called the caudate lobe, and the one that is next to your gallbladder, that's called the quadrate lobe. Now, do understand that there is specific blood vessels associated with liver. Anytime you hear the word hepatic or anything that is associated with hepatic implies your liver. For instance, hepatitis implies the inflammation of liver as a result of a viral infection. Now, in terms of microscopic structure, if you take a look at a cross-section of the liver, you will notice these hexagonal structures, which are depicted right here. And these hexagonal structures are referred to as the lobules. And they are the ones that are responsible for doing over 500 functions total for your liver. In another sense, your liver is extremely important for your health and your survival. Right here, you can also see in the posterior aspect of your liver, you can see your gallbladder tucked in underneath that. And you can see that the duct that is originating from the gallbladder is referred to as the cystic duct. Now, the other thing that I want you guys to notice right here is this area right at the center of the liver called the porta hepatis. Porta hepatis is an area near the center, and it is where all the blood vessels as well as the nerves and the ducts either enter or exit your liver. Now, on the same note, we're talking about blood vessels. So what are the main blood vessels associated with liver? Like any other organs, your liver will contain a hepatic artery or a main artery, in this case called hepatic artery, and a main vein, which is called the hepatic vein. So hepatic artery is going to be responsible for bringing the oxygenated blood to your liver, and it is going to have two main branches, right and left, because of your two main lobes of the liver. And hepatic vein is the name of the blood vessel that basically collects the oxygenated blood, nutrient-rich blood from your liver and return that into the inferior vena cava. So depicting on the picture, here in red, you can see your hepatic artery coming in and forming the two branches, which are your right and left hepatic arteries. You also can see your hepatic veins right here and right here, which are dumping into the big blood vessel right at the center, which is your inferior vena cava. So here is another picture kind of highlighting the same idea. You have your hepatic artery coming in, and then hepatic artery goes into the right and left branches. You have your hepatic vein, which is the two main branches are the right and left. You also have the side ones that are emptying into your inferior vena cava. However, you should also notice that other than the typical red and blue color we also have a purple blood vessel here, which is called the portal vein or hepatic portal vein. So what is this one? So hepatic portal vein is the blood vessel that is going to carry, pay attention to this, it's going to carry nutrient-rich blood from your stomach and intestines into your liver for the purpose of detoxification. So what does that mean? If you look at your liver, one of the main functions of the liver listed is detoxification from poisons and drugs. So let's say the food has been absorbed or the nutrients have been absorbed in your stomach and your small intestine, and now it's in the blood. Does it mean everything that you have absorbed is something that is essential or needed or healthy for your body? And the answer is no. So a lot of the absorption happens because of the molecules are the right size or they're lipid soluble or they have certain characteristics that allow them to be absorbed. Again, that does not imply that those molecules are needed or necessarily good for you. So before you introduce all of those absorbed nutrients into, or absorbed components into your circulation, that blood first needs to go to your liver for the purpose of detoxification. So in reality, this is what happens. Blood comes from your stomach and your intestine. It comes in through the hepatic portal vein. Hepatic portal vein branches, which are the two purple branches you see right here, to a right and left hepatic portal vein. Blood goes and gets cleaned, and then after it cleans up, it gets picked up by your hepatic veins, goes through the inferior vena cava. If you guys recall, inferior vena cava ends in the heart, and then the heart returns it into your circulation. No other organ in your body has a third category of blood vessels like you have in liver, because liver is responsible for detoxing material as it comes into your body. We also have what we identified as right and left hepatic duct in your liver. The right and left hepatic duct are two ducts that are responsible for carrying bile from your liver, which eventually joins your gallbladder. And from gallbladder, everything gets emptied into the duodenum, which is the first part of the small intestine. So yes, it's a lot of information, so let's backtrack a little bit. So as of right now, we have talked about liver playing a role in terms of detoxification, correct? But we haven't really talked about what is some of the other main functions of the liver. We also talked about, in terms of liver, the fact that it has two main lobes, right and left. We have talked about the fact that it is connected and held in place by a falciform ligament. We also mentioned that it has 500 functions in our body. But what are some of the other functions within the digestive system? So here are some of the functions. So we have metabolic functions, which includes storing vitamins. Please make a notation for yourself that the vitamins that are mentioned here are considered to be fat-soluble vitamins, which are vitamin D, vitamin K, vitamin A, and vitamin E. Water-soluble vitamins like vitamin B and C are not stored, and any extra versions of those vitamins actually gets removed, typically through the urinary system. It also processes fat and amino acids. So for this, you will talk about that in detail in terms of metabolism in physiology class. So for now, what I want you guys to know is processing of fat and amino acids are done by liver. It is also responsible for formation of your blood proteins. Now, I don't know if you guys have reviewed the blood PowerPoint we discussed previously, but there are three main proteins produced by your liver called albumin, globulin, and fibrinogen. Albumin is responsible for ensuring that the blood maintains and holds on to this water, and the water does not leak into the surrounding tissue. Your globulin is identified as a transporter of ions and vitamins. And your fibrinogen is responsible for blood clotting. Now, going back to the functions, number one function in terms of digestive system is formation of what we identified as bile. It allows for emulsification of fat. So what does that mean? So think about the environment of our body. Our body is mostly made up of water, which means when you eat fat and that fat gets introduced into the watery environment of the intestines, that fat is not happy. So all of the fat molecules are going to join each other. So instead of having these little globules of fat, what you end up with is a large fat piece or a molecule. So imagine an enzyme like lipase try to break these apart, right? If they're little pieces, really easy. But if it's a really large fat droplet, it's going to be significantly more difficult for the lipase to break it down. This is what happens to the fat when it's in the stomach or intestines, when it's in the intestines and it has significant amount of water in that environment. So what does bile do for us? So bile take this large droplet of fat with very little surface area and very little chance of digestion and breaks it down to what? To little tiny fragments. So now each of these fragments can easily be accessed by your lipase enzyme and digested pretty rapidly. So bile is extremely important for the fact that it emulsifies fat by breaking it down to smaller droplets and making it easier for the process of digestion. So liver is responsible for production of bile in terms of digestive system. So what is the job of the gallbladder that is tucked in underneath your liver? It doesn't actually produce anything. All your gallbladder do is stores and concentrates the bile it receives from your liver. Eventually, when your body requires that bile, it releases it into the duodenum. And again, it allows the fat to be emulsified. So the duct that allows the gallbladder to release the bile into the duodenum is referred to as the cystic duct. And again, it originates from the gallbladder. Now, you may have heard of a word called gallstones. So what are gallstones? So what happens if you have way too much cholesterol in your system? That extra cholesterol can be crystallized and form tiny stones inside the gallbladder, and they can literally plug the cystic duct. So imagine you literally put a stone in front of a passageway for the release of bile. So here's how your body works. You eat something fatty, your body notices the level of fat is high. It allows the gallbladder to release bile through the cystic duct. Now imagine that duct is closed because there is a stone or gallstone right in front of it. It's going to cause significant amount of pain, localized on the right upper quadrant. Typically when they do diagnose you, they would try to help you adjust your diet to help the process or alleviate some of the pain. They do tell you to avoid fatty food, but if the pain continues to be significant and the issue is not resolved, then they do need to do surgery. And during this surgery, they do remove the gallstones by removing the gallbladder completely. Can people survive the removal of gallbladder? The answer is yes. The only effect would be that you will not be able to consume as much fat because your bile ability or bile storage ability has significantly decreased, which makes it less likely for you to effectively break down fat. Now, we have talked about the fact that duodenum is connected to the pancreas. It receives this digestive enzymes. It is also connected to your liver and gallbladder, and it receives bile from those two organs. So what are the duct system that allows the pancreas, gallbladder, and liver to release their material into the duodenum? So this is the duct system we're talking about. So I'm going to show you on a picture, and then you guys are more than welcome to go back and review it on the actual slide with the information. So we know this is your liver. Here is your right lobe. Here is your left lobe. So this one, this branch that is coming from the left is called the left hepatic duct. And this branch coming from the right is called the right hepatic duct. Now, when those two merge together, they form this branch right here, which is called the common hepatic duct, as in two hepatic ducts are merging together. The next duct that we have is the duct that is coming from the gallbladder, which is this one right here. And this is referred to as the cystic duct, correct? Now, at this point, your cystic duct as well as your common bile duct are merging together and coming out as one branch, and this new branch that is this long one going all the way to the duodenum is called the common, not common, it's called the bile duct. So that's the bile duct. Now, after the bile duct, is the bile duct emptying by itself? And the answer is no. You also have the pancreatic ducts merging into it. So now you have the bile duct coming from the liver and the gallbladder merging with the pancreatic duct. And all of these empty into this region, which is the narrowing at the end of the duodenum called the hepatopancreatic ampulla. And if I say, where does all of these release into? They are releasing into the duodenum. So one more time reviewing this, you have the right and left hepatic duct joining together to form your common hepatic duct. Common hepatic duct joins the cystic duct of the gallbladder and form what we identify as bile duct or common bile duct. Bile duct merges with the pancreatic duct coming from the pancreas and empties into the duodenum through the enlarging called the hepatopancreatic ampulla. Last part of our lecture is going to be focused on the large intestine. Large intestine is not necessary for absorption of nutrients. Rather, it's going to be essential for absorption of water and electrolytes. It is also contain what we identified as bacterial flora, which are essential in digestion of some of the unnecessary material or undigested material for us. Do remember that these are good bacteria that are helping us with certain components and survival. It also, large intestine has the ability to create mass peristaltic movement. Remember, peristaltic movements are associated with moving the food or chyme through the alimentary canal. And these mass peristaltic movement basically moves the indigestible material toward the rectum and eventually out of the body. The features of the large intestine is a smooth muscle strip that runs on the length of the large intestine called tinea coli. And so I'll show you this. This is basically the line that I'm talking about. You can see it all through the intestines. And the line is called tinea coli. And what it creates these pouches on the large intestine called hostra. So these pouches are produced by basically presence of the tinea coli. We also have the breakdown of the large intestine depicted in this picture. Reminder, the first part of the large intestine is cecum. Food then moves up, which is through the ascending colon, across through transverse colon, down through the descending colon, curves to the back, to the posterior aspect of the abdominal pelvic region, through the sigmoid colon. Fecal matter gets stored into the rectum and eventually exits through the anal canal and anus. Now, I mentioned this before, but kind of a review. This extension you see coming off of the cecum, that's the appendix, which is part of the lymphatic system, essential for the immunity of the body. Although a lot of people are there are understanding, at least as of right now, is that appendix may not do as much for us in terms of immunity. However, new research have appeared suggesting that they do have effect in terms of long-term immunity. Maybe no short-term effect, but they may have long-term effects on the ability to fight off infections. You also have a valve or a sphincter located right here. This sphincter is located between the ileum, which is right here, and the cecum. And this sphincter is referred to as the ileocecal valve. It prevents fecal reflexes, basically doesn't allow fecal matter to backtrack into the small intestine. Last concept that I'm going to talk about, and that's basically all you need to know for the large intestines, relatively short and to the point. The last thing I want you guys to focus on in terms of digestive system is a couple of disorders. Intestinal obstructions can be mechanical as a result of either adhesions, a tumor, or foreign object, a large presence inside the intestines. It could be non-mechanical obstruction, where the peristalsis is halted. It could be a result of trauma or intestines touched during surgery. So if you ever wonder why when somebody has done surgery, one of the first things they ask you is, have you pooped? That's because they want to make sure that the large intestine movement is still happening, and that sort of trauma as a result of surgery did not affect the peristalsis in the long term. Digestive system, as you age, we mentioned it gets less effective. So typically, middle age, you become more susceptible to gallstones and ulcers. And at an old age, the activity and ability of the digestive organs to complete their task becomes diminished or is diminished. There are less digestive enzyme released, and the absorbency capacity of the small intestine significantly declines. There is severe dehydration in the large intestine, which makes you more susceptible to constipation. One of the essential things that I also wanted to mention was about the small intestine, and I forgot to mention that in the previous PowerPoint, so I want to kind of backtrack and we'll finish up with this. This is all the way back to the small intestine, sorry, not the small intestine, the stomach. So what you have is, we mentioned that there is a sphincter at the beginning of the intestine. I keep saying intestine, I apologize. There's a sphincter at the beginning of the stomach and at the end of the stomach. So the sphincter that's located right here, which is the lower esophageal sphincter, or also known as cardiac sphincter, was important in terms of allowing the food to enter into the stomach and also prevents the food from going back up to the esophagus. So a lot of people may have heard of what we identified as heartburn or acid reflux. So the reason for that is basically when this sphincter, for whatever reason, is not doing its job, and it allows the acidic environment of the stomach to go up through the esophagus. I mentioned this because a lot of people ignore acid reflux, or they think it's something that can be treated with over-counter medication like Tums. But do understand that anytime that your esophagus is exposed to an acidic environment that is not supposed to be exposed to, your cells will recover, but they also have a chance of developing abnormalities. And those abnormalities can eventually lead to the cells developing to cancerous cells. So acid reflux that is not treated, or the underlying issue is not treated, can eventually lead to esophageal cancer because of the abnormality developed into the cells because of exposure and damages caused by the acidity of the stomach. The other thing I wanted to talk to you guys about was about the ulcers, the stomach ulcers. A stomach ulcer is not associated with stress. Stress has no effect on the stomach ulcers. It is the result of a bacteria called H. pylori, which basically has a drill head that drills through the mucus lining of the stomach and exposes the underlying tissues to the acidity of the environment of the stomach, and that causes the damage. Ulcers are treatable via antibiotic because the reason for it is a bacterial infection. And again, stress has nothing to do with you getting an ulcer. So please stop referring to, oh, I'm stressed out, I have an ulcer. Okay, that's about it for our digestive system. Our next lecture will be focused on the urinary system, and I will see you guys next.